In this forecast video, we are providing an emergency update on Hurricane Ian as it continues to strengthen into a major hurricane and is expected to majorly affect Florida as well as Cuba. We got a lot to talk about in this emergency update on Hurricane Ian, so let's get right on into things. So we're looking at my radar right now. We're looking at what we're expecting and what we're seeing right now with Hurricane Ian. Right now, Hurricane Ian is a Category 2 hurricane here, very powerful hurricane just to the north of Cayman Islands. This is expected to rapidly strengthen and hit Cuba with force. We're expecting that storm surge there in Cuba, as well as very damaging winds. Of course, the western tip there, Havana, you could be seeing impacts as well here. We have warnings, advisories. We'll get back to that later in the video here, but again, we have warnings, advisories, and all that already issued here in Cuba. We are expecting a major hurricane, possibly a Category 3 hurricane when it makes landfall there, passes over the western tip of Cuba. Again, going to be a significant situation there, significant impacts in Cuba as this major Hurricane Ian passes over the western tip of it. Then, as we can see here with the track of Ian, it is expected to rapidly strengthen into a Category 4 hurricane, possibly a Category 5, but for right now we're looking at a Category 4 hurricane, and then continue to ride the coast of Florida and then eventually make landfall somewhere near Tampa, that Tampa Bay region. We're watching as Hurricane Ian is expected to majorly affect Cuba and then right up the coast of Florida here. You can see we already have warnings, watches, and advisories all the way down the coast of west coast of Florida there. We are expecting many impacts, so let's get right into what the National Weather Service is saying for right now. So right now, here is the cone. Again, we just looked at it, but let's look at it here on the National Hurricane Center here. I might have said National Weather Service. It's pretty much the same thing. It's a product of the National Weather Service. But again, you can see that's where Ian is. Its winds are starting to extend. It again is starting to get more organized as it is a Category 2 hurricane right now. But again, this is expected to become a major hurricane as we go into tomorrow, and then by the time we get into later tomorrow, this will have already impacted the western tip of Cuba. We have hurricane warnings out for Cuba right now. As you can see here, those are hurricane warnings for the western areas of Cuba. Tropical storm warnings for Havana, Cuba as well, but we're expecting our biggest impacts on the western tip of Cuba. Again, that storm surge, coastal flooding there, as well as very, very destructive winds. You need to be prepared there in Cuba right now. If you still have a little bit of preparations, make those last preparations, and I would recommend to evacuate if you don't have a great plan to safely ride out the storm. I recommend to evacuate into more eastern areas of Cuba. But again, besides Cuba here, one of the main areas in the United States this is going to affect is Florida. That's where it's expected to make landfall. And we already have hurricane warnings up here in the Tampa Bay area. All the way down the coast, we have tropical storm warnings, as well as hurricane watches north of Tampa and some tropical storm watches even on the eastern coast of Florida right now. That's showing how significant this is going to impact Florida, the west coast, and even the eastern coast as well. We're expecting heavy impacts there in Florida. We also have a hurricane warning out for, I think, dry tortugas over there in Florida. So again, we are expecting major impacts for Florida. So let's look at what we're expecting with storm surge right now. As you can see, our bullseye right there is in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a very prone place to storm surge. When we see storm surge in Tampa Bay, it's usually not a good situation. It is a very low city, so a lot of times when we get that coastal flooding, we see a lot of the city actually come underwater, which is very bad news, and we are expecting 5 to 10 feet of storm surge here. So when you get excited about 8 inches of snow, at least I know I do, 8 inches of snow, this is 5 feet of that. This is 5 feet, not 8 inches. So we have to take this seriously. And again, rainfall, not snow here, but you get the point. 5 to 10 feet of water there in Tampa. I'm expecting this to be on the higher end, as we are expecting it to stall and ride up the coast of the western coast of Florida there. We are expecting major impacts, and that storm surge could be the biggest story out of this, as Tampa Bay is not looking good right now there in the city of Tampa. We are expecting incredible storm surge, if you are on the bay there, live somewhere on the bay, you have a business somewhere on the bay, make sure you have those sandbags, make sure your place is heavily protected because we are expecting major flooding there in Tampa. But besides that, north of Tampa, we're expecting 5 to 8 feet. South of Tampa, say Sarasota area, we are expecting 5 to 8 feet. And then there in the Keys, we are expecting 2 to 4 feet, and then up in the Big Bend region, where this is expected to make landfall, about 2 to 4 feet, maybe 5 to 8 feet. And again, this will change and update as time goes on. But again, Tampa is the hot spot there. We're expecting major storm surge there in Tampa. And when we talk about the winds here, you can see we have very good probabilities of having tropical storm force winds in Florida, likely hurricane force winds as Ian nudges itself closer to Florida. So again, significant impacts there in Florida. Destructive winds are going to be likely there, especially right along the western coast. I'd say from Fort Myers all the way to Panama City there, the Big Bend region, especially Tampa and areas north of there. That's where we're expecting our most destructive winds, and I think that's where we're going to be expecting our biggest problems with storm surge and again wind. And the last thing we're going to look at here in this emergency live update or not live, but recorded update here for Hurricane Ian, we are going to look at the European model. So as you can see, as we go into about tomorrow, we're expecting this to majorly impact Cuba. You need to be ready there in Cuba for this, as we are already seeing rain there in Cuba. The outer bands are starting to get close to you guys there. Again, we're expecting major inundation of rain in Cuba as well as there in Florida. So major problems are expected with that flooding. And then as we go into around Wednesday into Thursday, this does nudge its way closer to Florida. And as you can see, this is not a good situation, as it is expected to pretty much ride up the coast of Florida and then make landfall somewhere north of Tampa. But I don't know if where it makes landfall is going to be where the most significant impacts are going to be, because really the storm surge that's going to be caused by Hurricane Ian here is going to probably be the most significant thing, the most significant story that comes out of Ian here. Again, it's going to ride up the coast, Fort Myers, Sarasota, Tampa, Panama City, and everywhere in between, especially the Big Bend region and north of Tampa, as well as Tampa Bay itself, the city is Tampa there. We are expecting major impacts, and then it is expected to make landfall somewhere in the Big Bend region of Florida or just north of Tampa. Now, it is expected to weaken as it gets close to Florida, but that's not going to really that's not going to affect the rain potential, the flooding potential here, because whether how strong it is, it doesn't matter how strong it is, we're still going to see significant flooding there in Florida. So again, that sums up this video. This was an emergency update on Hurricane Ian. Again, major impacts there in Cuba, major storm surge there. Let's show it again here. Major winds as well, especially along the western coast of Florida, and significant storm surge in Tampa. Everybody there in these warned areas needs to be ready for this as Hurricane Ian starts to inch its way closer to Florida. As always, stay prepared out there, and I'll see you next weather update.